Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Bab. welcome, welcome back to Bab. Trying to remember my little tricks from Masechta Tainus to hold back the cough. Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed, Daf 30 of Masechta Yevamos. Friends, what do you want me to tell you? It's Yevamos. We're talking about Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Sarah, Rivka, sometimes random Rachel. What do you want me to tell you? This is life these days. On the Flamanoma Bays, we talk a shtickle about Gittin and Kiddushin. I don't know, maybe that changes things up a shtickle. Friends, we're going to start on the top of Daf Lamed Amud Aleph all the way to the top. Shloisha Achin. 3 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. It's like every daf. It's like, all right, friends, here we go. Here's just like a different manifestation, a different like tweak on the Reuven, Shimon, Levi model. So here we go. So it's like friggin' Looney Tunes, you know? Remember like Looney Tunes? You have like the Wile E. Coyote and this Roadrunner. It's the same characters. You know, this time he's got, this trick around the corner. This time, that trick. I guess instead of Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, we have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Sometimes Yehuda, Sarah, Rivka. So here we go. Here in our next episode of Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Sarah, Rivka. Okay, so in this episode of Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Sarah, Rivka, random Rachel, Shlosha Achim Shnai Mehem Nesuin Shtei Achayis. So in this episode, you have Reuven and Shimon are married to Sarah and Rivka, familiar story. Ve'echad Nasui Nachris, and Levi is married to random Rachel. Meis Echad Mibaile Achayis, Reuven dies. V'chanos Nasui Nachris es Ishto, and then Levi does Yibum with Sarah. Okay, we got it. Alright, joke's over, friends. This isn't like Looney Tunes. Looney Tunes is pretty, you watch it and you can kind of space out and, you don't really miss much. Friends, Masechta Yevamos, you gotta focus. So joke's over. Everybody's serious now, right? Good. I'm being serious. Anyways, so you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven and Shimon are married to Sarah and Rivka. Sarah and Rivka are sisters. Gewaldig. Now, Reuven dies, and then it's 3:10. So I have till 4:30. Okay, great. Reuven and Shimon. So Reuven dies. Now Sarah is sisters with Rivka. Sarah does Yibum with Levi. Levi's married to random Rachel. Okay, gewaldig. Now, Yotza. Wait, where am I? Okay, so Levi now marries Sarah. So Levi's married to Sarah and random Rachel. Vames. Levi gestorben. Hot gestorben. Does that make sense? I don't know. Levi's dead. So now what happens? So Shimon's the only one left. Now, here's the thing. Shimon's married to Rivka. Sarah is Rivka's sister. So, Mimele, Shimon is not going to do Yibum with Sarah, and random Rachel, is the Sarah of Sarah. So, neither Sarah nor random Rachel are going to do Yibum with Shimon. So, Arishona Yotzim Shemachos Isha. So, Sarah doesn't do Yibum with Shimon because Sarah is the sister of Rivka, who is Shimon's wife. Vishniya Mishum Tzaraso. And random Rachel doesn't do Yibum with Shimon because she's the co-wife of Sarah, who is the sister of Rivka, who's married to Shimon. Alright, fine. It's like Chad Gad Yah, we're getting close to Pesach. Right? The guy who did this, who did that, who was eaten by this, who was eaten by that. Also, B'maimer Vames, what if it happened like this? Reuven died. Levi didn't marry Sarah. He did Maimer. He gave Kesef Kiddushin, which is Midah Abonon. So now Midah Oraisa, they're not married. So Midah Oraisa, when Levi dies, random Rachel should do Yibum with Shimon. But Midrabanan, it's Kilu, they're married, and if we treat it as if they're married, well then Sarah is the sister of Rivka, which means that both Sarah and random Rachel would be potter from Yibum. So where am I? Also by Maimer Vames, Nachris Choletzes Flomis Yabemis. So what happens is, random Rachel will do Chalitza. She's not going to do Yibum, because Levi did Maimer with Sarah, so in that respect it's Ki'ilu, a co-wife, so she's not going to do Yibum, but she'll do Chalitza. Says the Gemara, Taima do Ovid ba Maimer. The reason why we treat it, right, the reason why random Rachel cannot do Yibum with Sarah, with Shimon, is because Levi did Maimer with Sarah. Haloy Ovid ba Maimer, Nochus Yabumi Nami Miyabu. But if there was no Maimer between Levi and Sarah, so then random Rachel would be able to do Yibum with Shimon. Right? Meaning we're saying that Ruvain died, Levi did Maimer with Sarah. And because he did Maimer with Sarah, in a certain sense, it's like he's married to Sarah. And if he's married to Sarah, well, Sarah is the sister of Rivka, so Memela Shimon can't do Yibum with Sarah. So therefore, as Sarah's co-wife, random Rachel doesn't do Yibum with Shimon either. But the implication being that if Levi did not do Maimer with Sarah, and therefore he was not married on any level to, or at least not on Maimer or Yibum level with Sarah. So if there was no Maimer, so then random Rachel would be able to do Yibum with Shimon. But now, says the Gemara, Omer of Nachman Zosomeres ein Zika v'afilu b'chad acha. So says of Nachman, you know what this is saying? This is saying that there's no Zika. That clearly then there's no Zika. How does Zika work? We know how Zika works. That when Ruvain dies, Memele, there's a bond between the other brothers. Now in this case, there's no bond between Sarah and Shimon, because Shimon's wife, Rivka, is Sarah's sister, so that's out of the question. So the only option is Levi. And if we say that there's a Zika between Sarah and Levi, well, in that sense, random Rachel is the co-wife of Sarah, who's a Zika with Levi. And in that capacity, random Rachel should not be able to do Yibum with Shimon, since she's the co-wife of since she's the co-wife of Sarah through this Zika, from the fact that the Mishnah implies that random Rachel can do Yibum with Shimon if there is no Maimer between Levi and Sarah. So that implies, argues Rav Nachman, that clearly there is no concept of Zika, because if there was, then random Rachel should not be allowed to do Yibum with Shimon, even if there was no Maimer. Friends, episode 2. Shlosha Achim. So next episode of Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, Sarah, Rivka, random Rachel. In this episode, Shlosha Achim, Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, Shnayim Meim Nesuim Shtei Achayos. Ruvain and Shimon are married to Sarah and Rivka. Ve'echad Nasui Nochris, and Levi is married to random Rachel, just like in the previous case. Meis Hanasui Nochris, Levi dies. Levi Poshit dies. V'chanos Echad Mibaile Achayos es Ishto, and then Ruvain does Yibum with random Rachel. So now Ruvain is married to Sarah and to random Rachel. Vames, and then Ruvain gestorben. Ruvain's dead. So now you only have Shimon left, and you have Sarah, who is the sister of Shimon's wife Rivka, so Mele, he's not going to do even with Sarah, and Random Rachel is the co-wife of Sarah, so she's also Potter. So Rishona Yotzeis Mishum Achos Isha. So Sarah does not do Yibum with Shimon because she is the sister of Rivka, Shimon's wife. Vishnia Mishum Tzar also. And Random Rachel doesn't do Yibum with Shimon either because she is the Tzara, she's the co-wife of Sarah, who's the sister of Rivka, who's the wife of Shimon. Also, about Maimer Vames, Nachris Choletzes V'Lomis Yabemis. However, so if Reuven had done Maimer with Random Rachel, right? So when Levi died, Reuven did Maimer with Random Rachel, and then Reuven dies. So Midoraise, they're not married, which means that Random Rachel should do Yibum with Shimon. However, Midrabanon, there was Maimer. So it's like they do have some connection, in which case, if she's a co-wife of Sarah, she'd be Potter. So if we say that Random Rachel Choletzes V'Lomis Yabemis does Chalitza, does not do Yibum. Fragt the Gemara Hasulam Ali Hanuach. Says the Gemara, why do I need this second example? I mean, they're very, very similar, right? The setup was the same, with Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, Sarah, Rivka, Random Rachel. The only difference was who died first. In the first case, Reuven died. In the second case, Levi died. And not only that, as the Gemara is about to explain, you could argue that this case is the obvious case. You can argue that this case is the obvious case. Why is this case the obvious case? Well, let's think about the first case for a second. In the first case, Reuven died. Levi did Yibum with Sarah. Now, if you can almost evaluate Random Rachel and Sarah, well, Random Rachel was Levi's wife. Rashi kind of labels Random Rachel, well, let's say this, the first wife and the second wife, the first wife being the main wife, the Iker, and the second wife being the Tafel, the secondary wife. And therefore, in the first case, Levi was his Iker wife, his main wife, was Random Rachel. Only when Reuven died did he do Yibum with Sarah, and then Sarah became the secondary wife, and even so, that Sarah was the secondary wife. When Levi died, Sarah, in her secondary position as the sister of Rivka, was nonetheless able to make Random Rachel, who was the main wife, Potter from doing Yibum with Shimon. So then Kal V'chomer, certainly in the next case, in the second Mishnah, where it's Levi who initially died, right? In this case, Levi dies, and then Reuven does Yibum with Random Rachel. Random Rachel is now the secondary wife, and then when Reuven dies, his main wife, Sarah, is the sister of Shimon's wife, Rivka, so she's part of Yibum, and obviously then the secondary wife, Random Rachel, is going to be part of Yibum as well. So this case kind of goes without saying. So says the Gemara, Sulamali, why do I need the second case? Hanu hach, it's basically the same thing as the first, and not only that, but hashto umahosum, in the first case, the achos isha havya tsara linochris, that in the first case, when Reuven dies, and Levi does Yibum, and sort of brings on Sarah in a secondary capacity, that she's the co-wife of the main wife, who's Random Rachel. Omart Nochris Asura, you say nonetheless that when Levi dies, Sarah in her capacity as the secondary wife is nonetheless able to make Random Rachel Potter from Yibum as well, on account of Sarah being the sister of Rivka, Shimon's wife. Hacha. So here in this case, when Levi dies, the Nachris have Yotzara, and then Ruvain does Yibum with Random Rachel, and Random Rachel is the secondary wife. La'achos Isha to Sarah being the main wife, who's the sister of Rivka, who's married to Shimon. Lo kol shekain. Certainly, the relationship between Sarah and Rivka, is going to mean that certainly Sarah is going to be potter, obviously, but also Random Rachel, who's Keilu secondary to Sarah. So, and for the Gemara, Tana Bereisha. So the Gemara says, well, the truth is that this this Mishnah was taught first. Not only that, but this is the only Mishnah that the Tana knew about, right? That when Levi dies and Random Rachel becomes the secondary wife to Sarah, and then when Ruvain dies, Sarah is able to make Random Rachel potter from Yibum. So Havitzar la'achos, where am I? So Tana hach Tana Bereisha v'hach chazil le'atera. And actually, the Tana thought that in the first case, where Sarah is just the secondary wife to Random Rachel, he actually thought that in that capacity, she would not be able to make Random Rachel potter from doing Yibum, because she's only the secondary wife. V'sharye, and he left it out. V'hoder chazil isura, and then when he realized this big chiddush that actually Sarah in her secondary wife capacity is nonetheless, by way of her relationship to Rivka, who's married to Shimon, is able to make Random Rachel also potter from Yibum, and because the Tana was so filled with geschmack out of this big gevaldige moiridike chiddush, aktima umishna lozazim imekoma. So he put that right. The initial Mishnah where with Sarah in the secondary capacity with the moiridike chiddush. So we put that Mishnah first, but this Mishnah remains as well. Moiridik. Friends, have I ever pulled out Moiridik on Babylon Talmud? Moiridik. My Rebbe in Reshit, Befal Willig, used to say Moiridik. I don't remember saying Moiridik. Maybe we should do more Moiridik stuff. Moiridik. Alright? In the next episode of Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Sarah, Rivka, Random Rachel, Shlosha Achin, okay, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, Shnai Mehem, Nesum Shnei Achayis, Reuven and Shimon are married to Sarah and Rivka, who are sisters. Ve'echad Nasui Nochris, Levi is married to Random Rachel. Meis Echad Mibaile Achayis, Reuven dies. V'chonas Nasui Nochris es Ishto, and then Levi marries Sarah. So now Levi is married to Random Rachel and Sarah. Friends, you ready for this? Umeisa Ishto Shel Sheni. But now listen what happens. Rivka dies. So therefore, once Rivka dies, V'achakach meis Nasui Nochris, and then Levi dies. So who's left, friends? Shimon and Levi's widows, Random Rachel and Sarah. Now, up until now, Sarah was the sister of Rivka, and therefore she wouldn't do Yibum with Shimon. But in this case, Rivka is out of the picture. So, Harezo, Asura Olav Olamis, but nonetheless, says the Gemara that still there's no Yibum, because since when Ruvain died, when Sarah's initial husband Ruvain died, Shimon was married to Rivka, and Sarah was Asura to Shimon because of Achos Isha. So even when Levi dies, and at that point Rivka is already dead, so it's no longer an issue of Achos Isha, nonetheless, since she was Asur the first time around, since when Reuven died, there couldn't be Yibum between Sarah and Shimon because she was also to him. So even when Levi dies and Rivka is already dead, so then still though they can't do Yibum because once she's also once, she's also forever. Rabbi Yisrael, I think it was you who said that he had enough of Reuben and his dysfunctional family. Yeah, it seems like an interesting place to be, Reuben. Lemaisa, I was telling my mom, Lemaisa today, I left the house. I had to do something. And I saw these two people riding on a tandem bicycle. And all I could think about is if it was Reuven and Shimon and a drone attack came and killed them both at the same time, what would their wives do? Yeah. Says the Gemara, Omar Rav, wait, 1 second. Fine. Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Rav says, Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav Ko Yevamo, she'einani kori ba b'shas nefila, Yevamo yovei aleo, harei keish esoch sheish labonim, v'asur. Friends, you remember that? When did we see that? We saw it a few days ago. What do you want me to tell you? Daf Chov Zayin Amud Beis. That, we said in Daf Chov Zayin Amud Beis, that, in that case it was a situation of when you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, I think, and then like Reuven and Shimon died and they're married to two sisters, right? So Reuven died and then Sarah had to do Yibum, and then Shimon died and then Rivka also has to do Yibum. Since at the time that Shimon died and Rivka has to do Yibum, she can't do Yibum because there's a Zika with also her sister Sarah. So therefore, even if like Sarah dies or whatever it is, or still you can't do Yibum with Rivka since at the time that she became a Yevama, you couldn't do Yibum with her, so therefore she's also forever. So again, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav says, Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, Kol Yevama she'einani kori ba b'shas nefila Yevama yovei aleo, that any time that you have a Yevama, that at the time that she becomes a Yevama, you can't do Yibum with her at that time. So harei keish esoch sheyesh labonim. So then we just, she has the same status as the wife of your brother, that they have children, and therefore Yibum isn't shaykh, so she's simply the wife of your brother. Vasura, and she's asura. My kamash malon tanina, the Gemara wants to say, why do I need Rab to teach me that halacha? I know it from our Mishnah. Harezo asura olav olamis. Ovenes or olav sha'achas. Our Mishnah says that when you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven's married to Sarah. Shimon's married to Rivka. Levi's married to random Rachel. Reuven dies. Sarah is usher to Shimon because Shimon's married to her sister Rivka. So therefore, she then does Yibum with Levi. When Levi dies, even though Rivka is already dead, still Sarah cannot do Yibum with Shimon because since she was usher the first time around, when Reuven died, she's usher forever. So why do I need Rav to tell me that whenever you have a Yevama, that when she becomes a Yevama, she's usher, then she remains usher forever? I basically know that from this Mishnah, and for the Gemara, Ma'odetema may have thought to say, Hanemile heichadlo ichazya Allah b'nefila rishona. I may have thought to say, yes, if we look at our Mishnah, what our Mishnah is saying is that the first time around, she was never permitted to Shimon. The first time around, Reuven died. She was forbidden to Shimon. She did Yibum with Levi. She was forbidden to Shimon the entire time. And then she did Yibum with Levi, and, Yibum was over. But she at no point was permitted to Shimon. But in a situation where she is permitted at some point during the Nefila Rishona, I might think it's allowed. For example, if we go back to our case from the other day, we have Reuven and Shimon and Levi. Reuven's married to Sarah, Shimon's married to Rivka. Sarah and Rivka are sisters. Reuven dies. So now Sarah's got to do Yibum. Shimon dies. Now Rivka needs to do Yibum. But Rivka's not able to do Yibum because she's a sister of Sarah. But then let's say Sarah dies or something like that. So at that point, Rivka becomes permitted. So I may have thought to say, well, Yibum hasn't been done yet. And while at the beginning Rivka wasn't allowed, but now she is allowed because Sarah is no longer in the picture. So I might think in that case it would taka be okay. And that's not comparable to our mission over here, where when Reuven died, Sarah was also to Shimon, so she just did Yibum with Levi and then it was over. And that entire time she was also to Shimon. But in a situation where, before Yibum had been done, she was also, but then became mutter, I might think it's okay, Kamash Malon. That's why I need Rav to teach me that in a situation where, prior to Yibum being done, she became mutter. I need Rav to tell me that she's still also, since at the time that she became a Yevamos, she was a surah. Hanami Tanina, but the Gemara says that also, we have a Mishnah to teach us that as well. If you have Reuven and Shimon married to Sarah and Rivka, okay, Meis Echod Meim, Reuven dies. Now when Reuven dies, his wife Sarah cannot do Yibum with Shimon because Shimon's married to Sarah's sister Rivka. Ve'achar kach Meisa Ishto Shel Sheni. And then Rivka dies. So now who's left? Shimon's dead, Rivka's dead. No. Reuven's dead, Rivka's dead. So you have Reuven's widow, Sarah, and you also have Shimon, who's no longer married to Rivka. So in that case, maybe Sarah could do even with Shimon. We say, Harezo Asura Olav Olamis. No, Sarah cannot do even with Shimon. Ho v'ne'esra Olav Sha'achas. Since since when Reuven died, Sarah was Asura to Shimon. So even when Rivka dies, she remains Asura. And that's a situation where Yibum had not yet been done, right? Sarah didn't do Yibum with anybody. And yet we're still saying that when she now becomes permitted to Shimon, i.e. when Rivka, her sister, dies, still she remains Asura. So I should know from there that when you have a situation that somebody was Asura but then becomes permitted, they still are not able to do Yibum. So why do I need Rav Yehuda Amarav to tell me that when somebody was Asura and then became Muteris, she remains forbidden? So Ma'adetema may have thought Hasam who the idchila mehai beisa legamri. Well, in that case, when right with Reuven and Shimon and Sarah and Rivka, no Levi and no random Rachel, Reuven, Shimon, Sarah, Rivka. In that case, when Reuven died, Sarah couldn't do Yibum at all because there were no other options. The only option was Shimon, who's married to her sister Rivka. There were no other options. And maybe that's why it's Asura in that case. Aval, hacha. But in this case, let's go back to for a second. Where she's not sort of pushed off from that house entirely. Meaning, so let's say you have a situation where you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. So then, where Reuven dies, and then she doesn't yet do Yibum with Levi, and then Rivka dies, and then Levi dies. So now the only option is Sarah with Shimon. Nobody had done Yibum with her yet, and she wasn't, there was the option of Levi, right? She wasn't completely locked out of the family when Reuven died. So I might think that in that case, she would be able to do Yibum with Shimon. Since she was permitted to Levi, maybe she should also be permitted to Shimon. Kamashman, that's why I need Rav Yehuda Amarav to say that no, in any situation where when Yibum kicked in, she was Asura, so she remains Asura. Okay, that's why we need Rav Yehuda Amarav. Alright, what am I going to tell you? In the next episode of Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Sarah, Rivka, random Rachel. Shlosha Achim, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Shnai men nisun shtei achayos. Reuven and Shimon are married to Sarah and Rivka. Sarah and Rivka are sisters. Ve'echod nosu nochus. Levi is married to random Rachel. Friends, listen up. Geiresh echod mi baile achayos es ishto vames nosu nochus v'konso hamigaresh vames zoi she'amru v'chulin shemeson is garshu tzorosein mutaris. Friends, in this episode, Reuven is married to Sarah, Shimon is married to Rivka, Levi is married to random Rachel. Now, Ruvain divorces, right? Ruvain and Sarah get divorced. So Ruvain's no longer married to Sarah. Levi dies. Ruvain does Yibum with Random Rachel. Now Ruvain is married to Random Rachel. He and Sarah had already gotten divorced before Levi died. So when Levi died, Reuven had no relationship with Sarah whatsoever. Levi dies, Reuven does Yibum with Random Rachel. Now Reuven dies, so Random Rachel can do Yibum with Shimon. Right? And says, so let's read that again. Shlosha Achim, you have three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Shnai men nesuin shtei achayos. Reuven and Shimon are married to Sarah and Rivka, ve'echad nosu Nachris, and Levi is married to Random Rachel. Geiresh echad mi balei achayos esishto. Reuven and Sarah get divorced, so he's no longer married to Sarah. V'meis nosu Nachris. Levi dies. V'chansa megarish, and Reuven, who is already divorced from Sarah, then does Yibum with Random Rachel, Vames, and then Reuven dies. Zoisha Amru, this is what the Mishnah at the very beginning of the Masechta said, V'chulin Shemeso Nizgarshu, that all of these 15 arayas, if they died, right, if Sarah, in this case, if Sarah were to have died, or what happened in this case is that Sarah and Reuven got divorced, so saying Mutaris, well then, their co-wives are permitted, right? I mean, in this case, Reuven and Sarah had gotten divorced even before Random Rachel had the opportunity to be a co-wife. So then certainly when Reuven dies, Random Rachel is able to do Yibum with Shimon. Now, says the Gemara, Taima de Geresh ve'achar kach meis. The Gemara wants to be medayik that the Mishnah had said that the reason why Random Rachel is able to do Yibum with Shimon is specifically because by the time Levi died, Reuven and Sarah had already gotten divorced. By the time that Levi died and Reuven did Yibum with Random Rachel, Reuven was only married to Random Rachel. He was not married to Sarah, not even the moment that Levi died. Time of the Gerish v'achar kach meis. It's because Reuven and Sarah got divorced, and only then did Levi die. Avo meis v'achar kach gerish. But if Levi were to die, creating a zika, or at least so we want to argue, if Levi dies, creating a zika between creating a zika between Random Rachel and Reuven, V'achar kach gerish, and then Reuven and Sarah get divorced, even though he hasn't done Yibum yet. Asura, he would not be allowed to do Yibum at that point, because, even though he hadn't done Yibum yet, but at the time that Levi died, Reuven was still married to Sarah, and therefore, at that point, by way of the zika between Reuven and Random Rachel, Sarah and Random Rachel were co-wives. Well, therefore, when Reuven dies, Random Rachel would not be able to do Yibum with Shimon, since she was a co-wife of Sarah, the sister of Shimon's wife, Rivka. So again, says the Gemara, the reason why Random Rachel is able to do Yibum with Shimon is because Reuven and Sarah had gotten divorced before Levi died, which means there was never any co-wife connection between Random Rachel and Sarah. And then Levi dies, and then Reuven does Yibum with Random Rachel. Reuven dies, Random Rachel could do Yibum with Shimon. Aval, but Mace, if Levi died, Ba'achar kach geresh, and then only afterwards did Reuven and Sarah get divorced, which means that at the time that Levi died and there was a zika created between random Rachel and Reuven was still married to Sarah. That makes random Rachel and Sarah kilu shtikul Sarah's shtikul co-wives, to the extent that even if now Reuven and Sarah get divorced, and he hasn't yet done yibum with random Rachel, but still, if they get divorced now, after there's already the zika, and then Reuven does yibum with random Rachel, if Reuven dies, random Rachel would be unable to do yibum with Shimon, since she's still considered like a shtikl co-wife with Sarah, who's the sister of Shimon's wife Rivka. Amar Rav Ashi is also married. She is zika afilu betray ache. So says Rav Ashi that, you know what this is implying? This seems to be implying that there is a zika, that there's a zika even with two brothers, right? When Levi dies, random Rachel can do yibum with either Sarah, with either Reuven or Shimon. And we're saying that there is a zika, and that on account of this zika, it's considered like random Rachel and Sarah are co-wives, to the extent that when Reuven dies, random Rachel will not be able to do yibum with Shimon, even though Reuven even divorced, right? Reuven and Sarah got divorced before he even married and did yibum with random Rachel. But what about the kasha from Rav Nachman from earlier? Friends, you remember the kasha from Rav Nachman from the top of today's page? Okay, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. But at the top of the page, we had said that in a situation where you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, Sarah, Rivka, and random Rachel, and Reuven dies, and nothing happens with Sarah, and then Levi dies. So we said that random Rachel is able to do chalitza, is able to do yibum with Shimon, implying that there was no zika between Sarah and Levi, because if there was a zika between Sarah and Levi, so then random Rachel would be the co-wife of Sarah, and she would be unable to do yibum with Shimon. So therefore, Rav Nachman wanted to say that is proof that there is no that there is no zika. Now over here we seem to be saying that there certainly is a zika, which is why we're saying that Reuven and Sarah would have to get divorced before Levi dies. But if they only get divorced after Levi dies, well, then when Reuven dies, random Rachel would not be able to do yibum with Shimon, because there was she was considered a co-wife of Sarah through zika. So what's the dealio? So Rav Ashi is saying over here that there is a zika, but Rav Nachman had proved from the top Mishnah that there's no zika. So Amalach Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, Hu hadin da'afalgav dilo avad ba maimer nachris mechalitz chalzo yabume lo miyabme. So says Rav Ashi, no, I disagree with that Gemara up there. Right? The Mishnah had said at the top of the page that if Levi does maimer with Sarah, so then it's like they're a shtickle married, and therefore it's like a shtickle that Sarah and random Rachel are co-wives, to the extent that if when Levi dies, random Rachel cannot do yibum with Shimon, and rather they do chalitza. We wanted to imply, but if they did, there was no mimer, so then random Rachel would be permitted to do yibum with Shimon, implying that there's no zika. Says Rav Ashi, no. Even if there was no mimer, still random Rachel would be unable to do yibum with Shimon on account of the zika. So therefore, says Rav Ashi that there is a zika. So again, Rav would say that there is a zika, and even if Levi did not do mimer with Sarah, nonetheless, when Levi dies, Nochris, random Rachel, Mechalitz, Chaltzi, Abu Minami lo B'Yabma, she would not be able to do Yibum with Shimon on account of the zika that she has, on account of the co-wifing that she has with Sarah, on account of the zika that Levi had with Sarah. Well, the Katani mimer. So then, why does it specifically say that if Levi did mimer, then she would have to do chalitza? La'afuke mi beishamai da'amri mimer kone kinyan gomer kamashmulan tilo ki beishamai. It's only to the exclusion of beishamai to make a point about mimer, that according to beishamai, mimer is kone kinyan gomer. It's a kinyan, and therefore, if it's kone kinyan gomer, then it would be like their mamish married, in which case a random rachel would be completely potter. But we're saying that random rachel is not completely potter. She still has to do chalitza. So therefore, it's to make a point that even if he does mimer, still random rachel would have to do chalitza. She is not completely potter, and that the halacha is not like Beis Shammai. But now asks the Gemara, Rav Nachman kasha de Rav Ashi. So now what does Rav Nachman do with Rav Ashi, right? So Rav Nachman had wanted to say that there is no zika. Rav Ashi says that there is zika, and he answered for Rav Nachman. Now, Rav Nachman, who says that there's no zika, what does he do with this Mishnah, which seems to be implying that there is a zika, and for that reason, Reuven and Sarah would have to get divorced before Levi dies. But if Levi died, then Memela there would be a zika, and then they would not be able. And then if when Reuven dies, random Rachel would be unable to do Yibum with Shimon. So the Rav Nachman kasha, this seems to sound like that there's taka zika. Kasha dervashi b'chi teima. And if you're going to say hu adin, the afilu meis v'achar kach geresh sarasu mutaris. And if you're going to say that no, that's not true, the halacha is actually that even if at the time that Levi died, Sarah and Reuven were still married, and only at that point did they get divorced, Rav Nachman would say that when Reuven dies, random Rachel would be permitted to Shimon because there's no zika, and random Rachel and Sarah were never co-wives. But then what is Zohi to exclude, right? Kilu. Right? We had said Zohi sha'amu v'chulin shemesu on his gashu tzarasei mutaros. This is the case that they said that if they get divorced, so then the tzaras are permitted, i.e., when Reuven and Sarah get divorced before Levi dies, the implication being to the exclusion of when they get divorced after Levi dies. But says Rav Nachman, no, even if they get divorced after Levi dies, still there's no zika, and therefore random Rachel would be able to do Yibum with Shimon when Reuven dies. So then what's being excluded from Zohi? So answer to Gemara, Limute konos v'achar kach gerish. Well, it excludes the situation where Levi dies, Reuven does Yibum with random Rachel, Reuven is now married to Sarah and random Rachel, and only then do Reuven and Sarah get divorced. And in that case, they were mamish co-wives. Reuven and Sarah then got divorced, but at one point they were mamish co-wives. Reuven did Yibum with random Rachel, and Reuven's two wives were Sarah and random Rachel. So in that case, even though Reuven and Sarah ultimately got divorced, when Reuven dies, random Rachel would not do Yibum with Shimon. So lemute konas v'achar kach gerish. In that case, when the mamish did Yibum with random Rachel, and only afterwards did Reuven and Sarah get divorced. So in that case, when Reuven dies, random Rachel would be unable to do Yibum with Shimon. Onicha yisavrla ke Reb Yirmiyah. So this makes sense if you hold like Reb Yirmiyah. Damritaver mishashanazo lo shanazo. V'aytana savar misa mapelas. V'aytana savar nisuna rishona mapilim. Zoy lemuta konas lo sov geresh. Friends, do you remember what this is? Where did we see this? Who could tell me quick? Who could tell me what daf we saw this on? Daf Yud Gimel. The Gemara had asked that our Mishnah says that if by the 15 arayas, if they get divorced, so then the arayas doesn't apply anymore, right? So, for example, if you have right, what was the example that we gave initially, like in the Mishnah? Well, you have Reuven is married to, and it's going to come up again on this daf. We'll use it as an example. Reuven is married to Sarah and to Rivka. Reuven is married to Sarah and to Rivka. Reuven dies. Sarah and Rivka need to do even with Shimon. The problem is, Sarah is Shimon's daughter. So of course, Sarah and Shimon do not do Yibum, but neither does Sarah and Rivka because she's the co-wife of Sarah. Anyway, neither do Shimon and Rivka because Rivka is the co-wife of Sarah. But the Mishnah had said that if Reuven and Sarah had gotten divorced before Reuven died, well, in that case, Shimon can do Yibum with Rivka. Now we said, but what about this Mishnah? This Mishnah seems to be saying that Davka, the divorce would have to be before Reuven. This Mishnah seems to be saying that Reuven and Sarah would have had to have gotten divorced before Reuven married Rivka. If at any time Sarah and Rivka overlapped as co-wives, so then Rivka would not do Yibum with Shimon. So it says Rabbi Yirmiyah, two different Tanoim. The Tana in the first Mishnah of the Masechta, his opinion was that it goes based on the whoever Reuven was married to at the time that he died. And therefore, says the Tana of our Mishnah at the beginning of the Masechta, that, well, since when Reuven died, he was no longer married to Sarah, they had already gotten divorced, he was only married to Rivka at the time, so then Rivka and Shimon can do Yibum. However, the Tana here holds that it goes based on the marriage, right? The time of the marriage. And since Reuven had married Sarah and had also married Rivka, and therefore they were co-wives together in marriage, so even if later on Reuven and Sarah got divorced, it doesn't matter. When Reuven dies, Rivka would not be able to do Yibum with Shimon. So now, so if you say that so if you say that this Mishnah means that that in a situation where when Reuven died, Sarah and Rivka were kind of overlapped as wives, so therefore, even though Reuven had ultimately and Sarah ultimately got divorced, Rivka is still Asr. So then I can understand Rav Nachman, right? So Rav Nachman is saying that there's no Zika. Rav Nachman in our Mishnah is saying, explaining our Mishnah, is saying that there's no Zika, which means that in our case, with Levi and Random Rachel, so when Levi dies, Reuven is still married to Sarah. Says Rav Nachman, there's no Zika between Random Rachel and Sarah. Between Random Rachel and Reuven, and therefore Sarah and Random Rachel are not considered co-wives. But what the Mishnah, when it says Zohi to exclude, what's it excluding? It's excluding a situation where Reuven then did Yibum with Random Rachel while he was still married to Sarah. Reuven did Yibum with Random Rachel while he was still married to Sarah, and then Reuven and Sarah got divorced, and then Reuven dies, which means at the time that Reuven died, he was only married to Rivka, but nonetheless, since Rivka and I'm messing up the names, oops. At the time that Reuven died, he was only married to Random Rachel, since he and Sarah had gotten divorced. Nonetheless, since they overlapped, Rav Nachman would say that is the case that's excluded from the Mishnah, and Random Rachel would be unable to do Yibum with Shimon. So now says the Gemara, Hanicha, that makes sense. If you hold like Rabbi Yirmiyah de Amar, who said, that the author of the Mishnah at the beginning of the Masechta, which says that as long as at the time that Reuven died, he was only married to Random Rachel, so then Random Rachel would be able to do Yibum with Shimon even if they did overlap as wives. V'hai Tana Sovar, and Misa Mapeles, V'hai Tana Sovar Nisun Arishonim Mapilim, that the Tana at the beginning of the Masechta learns that it matters who's married to Reuven at the time that Reuven dies, and in this case, only Random Rachel is married to Reuven, and therefore she could do Yibum with Shimon. V'hai Tana Savar, and the Tana of our Mishnah over here holds that Nisun Arishonim Apilim, that the marriage is what we take into consideration, and if Sarah and Random Rachel overlapped as co-wives at any point, so then even though when Reuven dies he was only married to Random Rachel, he and Sarah had already gotten divorced, nonetheless Random Rachel would not be allowed to do even with Sarah, since she was married at some point or another together with Sarah. What did I say? Random Rachel would be unable to do Yibum with Shimon since she was married at the same time she overlapped with Sarah as a co-wife of Reuven. So Zoe Lemute Kanas Levasov Geresh. So therefore our Mishnah is coming to exclude a case where Reuven did Yibum with Random Rachel and then only later got divorced from Sarah. Eli Isavela Kirave. But if we hold like Rave, Damar Olam Chad Tanahu, who says that no, really it is the same Tana. V'zo ve'ein tzarich lomar zo katani, and it's saying this, and you don't even, it goes without saying this, right? Meaning that according to Rave, no, it's the same Tana. The first Mishnah of the Masechta, this Mishnah, it's the same Tana. His opinion is that as long as at the time that Reuven dies, he's only married to Random Rachel, so then Random Rachel would be able to do Yibum with Shimon, and certainly in a case where they got divorced before Reuven did Yibum with Random Rachel, certainly in that case it goes without saying that Random Rachel would be able to do Yibum with Shimon. Well, if that's the case, Zoe Lemute Mai. Well, then what is the case that is excluded? Right? This is the situation, right? We say that when Reuven and Sarah get divorced, that is the case where Random Rachel can marry Shimon, to the exclusion of what? Al Korchech Ki Rabbi Yirmiyah Sfirle. So therefore, it must be certainly that Rav Nachman holds like Rabbi Yirmiyah, and this Tana is excluding the situation where Kanas Ulevasov Yibim, that Reuven did Yibum with Random Rachel, and only then did he and Sarah get divorced, and Sarah and Random Rachel is unable to marry to do Yibum with Shimon. Fine. Uli Rave. Now, according to Rave, Hanicha Yisavrla Kiravashi. So, according to Rave, it makes sense if you hold like Rav Ashi, that there is a zika. Zohi limute, mace below geresh. It's coming to exclude a situation where Levi died. Reuven and Sarah did not get divorced. Reuven then dies, and we're saying that Random Rachel cannot do Yibum with Sarah, since by way of Zika, which is what Rav Ashi holds of Zika, by way of Zika, Random Rachel was a co-wife of Sarah, so therefore she cannot do Yibum with Shimon. But if he holds like Rav Nachman, who says that there's no Zika, then what's the case that is being excluded? So it must be then that Rave, who says that it's the same Tana in both cases, he must hold like Rav Ashi, that there is Zika, and the case being excluded it is when Reuven and Sarah did not get divorced. Friends, new Mishnah. V'chulan, in all of these 15 cases of Arayis, Shahayu boyen kiddushin o gerushin besofik. Hare elu atzaris chotzes v'lo misyabmis. Friends, what does this mean? Who could tell me what this means? So if we go back to like our original case, like from the beginning of the Masechta that I referenced earlier, so you have Ruvain is married to Sarah and to Rivka. Ruvain dies, and now Shimon needs to do, right, so now Sarah and Rivka need to do Yibum with Shimon. The only thing is, Sarah is Shimon's daughter. So therefore, of course, he doesn't do Yibum with Sarah. And also he doesn't do Yibum with Rivka, the co-wife. Now, what happens though if the Kiddushin with Sarah was a Safek Kiddushin? So it's unclear if Reuven was actually married to Sarah. It could be that he wasn't married to Sarah. And if he wasn't married to Sarah, so then Rivka would need to do Yibum with Shimon. Or what if there was a Safek get? Right. So what if Reuven was married to Sarah and they got divorced, but it was a Safek divorce. They're not sure if they're actually divorced. So if they are divorced, so then Rivka would have to do Yibum with Shimon. But if they're not divorced, so then she doesn't have to do Yibum with Shimon. So what happens when there's like a Safek, a question about if Reuven is in fact married to Sarah? So in that case, Rivka should do Chalitza. So v'chulan, in all these cases, shayubayin kiddushin or gerushin besafek, if there was between Reuven and Sarah kiddushin or gerushin that's questionable, hare elu atzaris choltzes v'lo misyabmis, so then Rivka does Chalitza, not Yibum. Ketzad Safek Kiddushin. What's an example of Safek Kiddushin? Zarak la Kiddushin Safek Karev lo, Safek Karev la. What if they were in an area that was 8 amas, in an area of 8 amas, and he threw the money of the Kiddushin, and it's unclear if it landed in his 4 amas or her 4 amas. Zeu Safek Kiddushin. That's an example of Safek Kiddushin, of uncertain Kiddushin. Safek Gerushin. What's an example of uncertain divorce? Pasav b'chsav yod. What if he wrote it with his own handwriting? He wrote the bill of divorce with his own handwriting, vein all of Edom, but there's no witnesses. The Yeshal of Edom, or what if there are witnesses, vein bozman, but it doesn't say the time that it was written. Yesh bozman, what if there's the time that it's written, vein bo ela erecha, but there's only one witness on it. Zeu savek gerushin. These are examples of uncertain divorce, and since it's uncertain divorce, so then we, just in case, we do Chalitza. Fine. The ilu begerishin safek karev lo katani. Fact the Gemara. But when it comes to divorce, we didn't mention that maybe it's too close, maybe it's closer to him, maybe it's closer to her. Right? When it came to Kiddushin, we mentioned that he threw some money. Unclear if it's in his dalet amas or in her dalet amas. So that's the safek Kiddushin. Why don't you say the same thing by divorce? That he threw the bill of divorce, unclear if it's closer to him or closer to her. So my timer, how come? So Amar says, Rabba, Isha zo bechezkas heter l'shuk omedes, umisofek ataba le'osa al te'asarna misofek. So says Rabba, well, if you think about it, Rivka right now, what was the chazake? The chazake was Reuven was married to Sarah. Sarah is the daughter of Shimon. Rivka is assuming that, okay, if Reuven dies, she's a co-wife of Sarah. Sarah is the daughter of Shimon. Memela, they're both going to be pater from Yibum. Now, here comes the Safek get. And now we have this Safek, this doubt. And we say, well, maybe if it's a divorce, well then Reuven's not actually married to Sarah, which means that Rivka and Shimon would have to do Yibum. But we're saying, but right now she's in this chazaka, she's in a certain assumption that if Reuven dies, she'll be able to go and do whatever the heck she wants. And therefore, out of doubt, out of safek, we are not going to override that chazaka, and therefore we don't want to create a mess, and we'll say forget about that safek, and she would keep the chazaka, which is that she can go and do whatever she wants. So again, Amar Rabba says, Rabba, Ishazo b'chezkas heter l'shuk omedes, that Rivka has a chazaka that, Reuven and Sarah are married. Sarah is Shimon's daughter. If Reuven dies, they're both going to be, right? Sarah and Rivka are both going to be parted from Yibum. And misafek ataba le'osra. And out of a suffix of where this get landed, you're going to say that now she has to maybe do Yibum. Al te'asana. Don't make her asura misafek out of doubt. Amalei Abaye, says Abaye, ihachi b'kiddushin nami. But then why don't we say the same thing by kiddushin? That when it comes to kiddushin, it's the opposite. That right now, Rivka, right, meaning if we're not sure if Sarah and Reuven are married, what we do know is that Reuven and Rivka are married, and Rivka therefore is assuming that if Reuven dies, Rivka is going to be doing Yibum with Shimon. But now out of a suffix, you're coming to shake that up. And you're coming to say that, well, maybe Reuven and Sarah are in fact married, and therefore Rivka is not going to be doing Yibum with Shimon. Right? So Yachi, if so, b'kiddushin nami, also when it comes to kiddushin, nema, ishizo b'chezkas heter liyavam omedes, that Rivka right now is under the assumption that if Reuven dies, she'll be marrying Shimon. Umisafek, and out of a doubtful kiddushin, atabala osra, you're going to say that she's now not able to do Yibum with Shimon. Al te'asarna misafek. Don't make her asur now to do Yibum with Shimon out of a suffix of maybe she's married, maybe Reuven's married to Sarah, the daughter of Shimon. So says Rabba also lechumra. Yeah, but there we're just being machmir. We're saying, well, just in case, we'll treat it as a kiddushin to the extent that Rivka cannot do Yibum with Shimon. But says the Gemara, Hai chumra dasli de kulahu. But one second, this is a stringency that we're saying, well, we're just going to be stringent, and even though, yes, the chazaka is that Reuven and Sarah are not married, because it's a suffix kiddushin, but we'll be stringent and say that Rivka nonetheless is unable to do Yibum with Shimon. But this is a stringency that can lead to leniency. In what sense? Zimnin de ozil hu mekadesh lo la'achosa kiddushay vadai. Well, Reuven has a suffix kiddushin with Sarah, but what if he then does a vadai kiddushin? He certainly then goes and marries Sarah's sister. V'inami, or else, Zimnin de osa acher mekadesh lo ladida kiddushay vadai. Or maybe somebody else is going to be mekadesh Sarah. And since you're forbidding Rivka from doing Yibum with Shimon, Amre dekama kiddushin or debaser lav kiddushin. So people will say, well, how come Rivka didn't do Yibum with Shimon? It must be because Reuven was married to Sarah. And if Reuven was married to Sarah, so then what about the kiddushin that Reuven did with Sarah's sister? What about the kiddushin that somebody else did with Sarah? People are going to think that the kiddushin between Reuven and Sarah was real, but the truth is that the other kedushin were the real ones. So the Gemara wants to know, right? How can you simply be stringent to say that Rivka is unable to do Yibum with Shimon? If you do that, then it's like giving validity to the marriage between Reuven and Sarah, and then there could be unwanted consequences. So, and for the Gemara came the kamatzu chas chalitza mediyade dechumer ba'amu. Well, enochinami that we're saying that Rivka can't do Yibum, but we're also saying that she has to do chalitza. So since we're also saying that Rivka has to do chalitza, so it's like it's a chumrah. It's clear that it's just a chumrah. If that's the case, gerish enami lesne v'litzrucha chalitza umediyade dechumer ba'amu. So says the Gemara, well, if that's the case, then why don't we say the same thing by divorce? Right? We said that we didn't list the case of divorce when it's like unclear if it's closer to him or closer to her, because because we're not going to change the chazaka of her being able to marry anybody else. But why don't we just say, let's just do a chumrah and do chalitza? And then know it's a chumrah. Yeah, but the thing is that if you say, that that we would do chalitza in that case, well then, if you can do chalitza, then you could do yibum. And then you might have a situation where Rivka is doing yibum with Shimon, and in that case, the chazaka is that Ruvain and Sarah are actually married, which means that Rivka is potter from yibum with Shimon. Hachonami, imata omer choletzes misyabemes. So, but if that's the case, well then shouldn't we be concerned with the same thing over here? That if Rivka, that in the Safek Kiddushin case, if Rivka does chalitza, she might end up doing yibum. And for the Gemara, v'tisyabim ve'imechach klum, chazaka kokaim. To which the Gemara says, let her do yibum. What do we care? What's the chazaka? The chazaka is that Reuven and Sarah are not married, and if Reuven and Sarah are not married, so then Rivka can do chalitza, can do yibum with Shimon, right? As a chumrah, we're saying that she should do chalitza. What if she ends up doing yibum? That's fine. The chazaka is that she should be able to do yibum anyway, so it's no big deal. Friends, we did a lot of stuff about Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Sarah, Rivka, and Random Rachel. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.